Decision 2024 getting another day closer to the August 3rd primary, and it brings us to another interview with a candidate to be Guam's delegate. Joining me is another candidate on the Democratic ticket, David Lotz. Half a day, Dave.
Well, thanks for having me in here. I know I'm a bit new to the political scene, although I've had some history that goes back a ways, but I'm excited and enthused and looking forward to seeing how I will do.
You shared with me some notes about your work experience. You were in the U.S. Navy, Parks and Recreation, Anderson Environmental. You worked also in the government of Guam for other offices as well. So I want to have you run us down your path that led you to make a decision to run to be Guam's next delegate.
Well, I've been outspoken on issues over a considerably long amount of time, and I just think running for delegate, we just need somebody who gives people in the election a serious choice and not just an echo of what we've had too often. So I'm going to be outspoken on some issues, and these really should not surprise people. I've been critical of the military buildup, and I think we need to be assertive and represent Guam's interest and not just represent the military to Guam. Now, I did make a reference to, this goes back a little ways, but I did work for then Delegate Antonio B. Wonpat, and I also handled federal programs in Ricky Berdalio's second administration. So I've got a little bit of background and knowledge of how to relate to federal agencies and employees, and while you say things have changed in Washington, some things change and some things never change.
So go back to that moment where you were either you were at home, you were at work, and you figured, I'm going to go to the Guam Election Commission and pick up a candidate packet.
Well, I just decided that where should I go? What's a possibility that I could make my view, which I understand from talking to an awful lot of people, they want to have things expressed because they get frustrated that going to Washington, they really feel that the people's voice is not always heard. And the people have a dynamic expression on a lot of issues, and I think that's what I need to portray. Now, let me give you a little insight, because I'm not only a military historian when I was with the War in the Pacific National Historical Park, but I had 5 years at Anderson Air Force Base environmental flight. I was responsible for protection of historic sites and for environmental assessment. And I was on numerous meetings dealing with military buildup issues. So my experience in dealing with military issues and the buildup, I think, is a real asset, because what I do not see either in the government of Guam or in the delegate's office is the expertise to critically examine what is coming down the road with the military buildup. When you look at the history of the buildup, this is going back already 20 years. And when it first came out, one of the big items was an aircraft carrier wharf. That vanished. Why did that vanish? Then there was going to be a road across the middle of the island, and that vanished. And then there was supposed to be a fighter town, Air Force fighter town at Anderson Air Force Base. And that went away. And now all of a sudden, no, really not too much of a sudden, the critical item is the 360-degree missile defense system. That's coming in rather late. That should have been here considerable 10 years or more ago. Now, one of the concerns about the political dynamics and the military issues in the Pacific have obviously changed. When you go back into history, during the Cold War, there was no missile defense system on Guam.
Right.
And yet we had B-52s at Anderson when it was a strategic air command base. They were on nuclear alert, which meant they had at least 2 bombers, nuclearly armed, on the flight line, engines running, crew on board, ready to take off. That's how critical it was during the Cold War. And certainly we would have been a target, but the Pentagon decided they did not want to put the Nike missiles here. They were in the United States. They were actually in Okinawa, but not in Guam. Now things have changed, and there's a deemed essential for a missile defense system, which I think is long overdue, and we need that. And to me, the dynamics have changed, and what are we doing, and particularly, what is the Department of Defense doing? We have virtually no civil defense program to protect the people of Guam. We need that. I think the Department of Defense should be funding that equally with other programs. There's no information to the public how to prepare. There's no thought of giving protection in shelters, or perhaps even providing people with the means to reinforce their homes. We don't even have an active civil defense siren system. I think that's a disgrace, and I think the Department of Defense bears responsibility, and that should be funded.
I think it's clear that you already have the campaign and your platform unraveling, and I want to hear more about that, but we're going to take a quick break. More of the interview when we return. Welcome back to the interview. Joining me in studio for this round of Decision 2024 is candidate for Guam delegate under the Democratic ticket, Dave Lotz. Hafa day, Dave.
Thanks again. I'm always a pleasure to be here and to have open discussions with people who are concerned about the future of our island, because, you know, I really don't see a broader vision from too many of our political leaders. You need to have a broad perspective, and you need to look down the road. Where are we going? And I'm afraid that we have a mindset here that has to be changed. We have foreign investors and we have the military that are making decisions for us. We should be making those decisions. We should be asserting ourselves. One of the examples was, if you remember back, beginning of the buildup, the Marines decided they want the Pagat archaeological site for their firing range.
Around the 2000s, yeah?
Yeah, and it was like, wait a minute. Governor Felix Camacho actually volunteered that location. And then non-government entities got on board. There was a lawsuit. We had a massive demonstration in Pagat, and the location was changed. But we still have opportunities. But if the military wants to use our island, then we need to be more assertive in what the benefits are that we can get. We have too much business going to military contractors. There's been items in the news about taxes being lost. When I'm in Congress, I'd like to see oversight hearings on what's happened to the taxes. What is DOD's policies on how they get contractors? And I've been in that system on contracting. You have these IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contractors. All you have to do is push a few buttons on the computer and you've chosen a contractor. Are we adequately plugged into that system? Do we have an agency out here from the federal government briefing people on how they can get this work?
It clearly sounds like, just based on your research and all the involvement that you had in the past couple of decades, especially with regard to military relations, your message is Guam has been in the dark. And so can you share with our viewers here and the voters what your platform is?
Well, my platform is to be supportive and yet critical of the military, but always keeping in mind delegates work for the people of Guam. And it needs to be assertive in Washington that we need to look out to get our benefits. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to a different subject. delegates usually don't get involved in controversy like the hospital location. But now when you think about it, what's one of the items that have come up about the hospital location? Fault zones or sinkholes. Well,
Right.
being in Washington, I'd get on the phone and ask the U.S. Geological Survey to send a geologist out to give a first-hand inspection and see how that went. Because in all this discussion on geology, no in-depth reports have come up that deal with what is the real status of that. Faults, I've had a little bit of college in geology. Faults can be active and inactive. And you got to look at that specific fault. And the earthquakes we get on Guam, they don't originate at Epau Point. They're always, you notice the epicenter is usually miles away under the ocean. So
Yes.
we need to research and get the experts to give us good information. They are public servants, just like a delegate is a public servant. And my whole sense is I don't pretend to be an expert on everything, but we need to reach out to get that expertise.
Okay. Is there any of the goals that you hope to pursue should you make it to Washington, D.C.?
Well, there's a multitude of goals. We need to be looking into what specifics are needed for health care.
Yes.
Again, we can reach out to agencies to lend expertise in all the public forums and presentations on what's going to go into what's the hospital going to look like and where it's going to be. There's been no substantive information as to what goes into the hospital, what is needed in maternity ward, how many operating rooms, etc. I know of at least one federal agency that I think could at least be asked to come out and do an assessment. And it may surprise people, but there's the Indian Health Service who provides care in many of our Indian reservations. They are knowledgeable on indigenous communities, and that background should at least help us. Now I want to go on to one other issue. I have a background in historic preservation. I actually was at Parks and Recreation when the program was founded in 1974 on Guam. And I've been quite vocal about the destruction of Sabana Fadang and Magua up at now Camp Blas. That was completely unnecessary. Going to Washington, I think the subcommittee on Native Americans and Insular Affairs should have an oversight hearing. Did the National Historic Preservation Act work for Guam? We know there's problems. What can be improved? The public forums certainly were not designed to give true, meaningful discussions with the people. They were basically putting your comments into a black hole on the web, and you never know what happened to the comments. Now, one other thing I think is very important. I got to pull out this here.
Sure. Your notes.
There's an act of the U.S. Congress that's been around for a while, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas are not included on that. We need to protect from federal actions and to retrieve additional human remains, respectively, for reinterment that are the result of, this is not only federal action, this is also in private actions, but there's a critical oversight, and it really deals with our dignity and protection of our ancestors. So those are just examples of a few areas that we need to be advocates for the people of the island.
And an advocate, if you guys don't already know, Dave is no stranger to the public eye as well, not just in his local government service, his federal government service, but also an author, correct?
Yes,
We'll talk a bit about that more in the next block, but we're going to take one more break, and then I want to hear a little bit more about your plans for Washington, D.C. should you get that seat, and then an address to the voters. But more of the interview when we return. Welcome back to the interview. Continuing our discussion now with candidate for Guam delegate under the Democratic ticket, Dave Lotz. Hafaday, Dave.
Thank you.
And if you don't know him, he's also an author, The Best Tracks on Guam and Patrol Area 14.
Well, both of those books come from different of my interests. I've been known as a long-time hiking advocate and actually founder of Guam Booney Stoppers. It has been hiking for decades on the island, but in now its 4th edition, The Best Tracks on Guam, it takes you to the best 44 hikes on the island. So it's available, but it's going to go out of print, and there's going to be some dramatic changes for the next edition. Then my other book, Patrol Area 14, it's the history of U.S. Navy submarine patrols to the Mariana Islands in World War II. Mm-hmm. That was considerably overlooked in previous histories of World War II. And it's rather unfortunate because basically the islands of the Marianas were isolated by our submarines even before the Marines landed here.
Wow.
So just different perspectives on our heritage and what you can go out and people can always tell me to take a hike, and they may within the political environment.
For you, you'll take it literally.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, mm-hmm. I encourage people on all of our islands to get out and learn and explore about our islands. And I've been very fortunate to not only explore Guam, but Rota, Tinian, Aguijan, Saipan, and even up to Pagan Island. So I have a good understanding of the islands and meeting a lot of friends up in the Northern Mariana Islands.
Yeah, and the journey also includes now your run for public office.
We'll see how that goes. I'm enthused. I think we're going to give it a good try, and we know we have some good candidates out there, but again, I want to offer a serious choice.
What are some of the other issues that you see you can address should you make it to as the delegate?
There are some broad issues, and then there are some specific issues. Let me start with the one specific issue. And there's an area over here in Diridu, Tangisan Beach. Most people know about that. It's military owned. When I was Parks Administrator, we took care of that area. And by the way, those were the days when there was adequate political support and funding for our parks. It's unfortunately languished. Tangisan Beach is becoming a dumping ground. It's not being maintained. And I think that's a disgrace, not only for Guam, but particularly for the military. Going into Washington, I just have a vision that every year there's a National Defense Authorization Act, mm-hmm. and it has pages after pages, and a lot of them are specifics to specific states and territories. I would like to include in that act specific language that directs the Department of the Navy to lease that at no cost to the government of Guam for a park and give them a deadline to accomplish that.
Wow.
I mean, you think with
what
all
do you
the
envision?
Money, you think with all the money DOD has that they could at least work and get that area taken care of. Mm-hmm. And then I'm really concerned about health care. And while most of the island's discussion has been on a hospital, we need to look at what care is needed. We have a tremendous amount of people that end up going off island for health care. And it would be nice if we could get back to a health care planning agency that could give you the information and do the research. But we have infants, we have Mananka, we have veterans who have critical needs. Mm-hmm. And those needs to be identified and then addressed. My wife is a lifetime member of Guam Memorial Hospital Volunteers Association, so I learn an awful lot about the needs of our hospital. And one of the programs she works with is sending infants and young children off island for medical care. Mm-hmm. and that's critically important. So my wife, Beverly, I need to mention her name.
Hi, Beverly.
She has a real commitment to that part of the community, just like I have of being assertive in protecting our heritage.
Very nice. And I know that one of the other topics that you prepared for us today is with regard to the population decrease that we've seen since the pandemic.
Well, it's a matter of concern.
Mm-hmm.
We have apparently all this money with the military buildup coming to Guam, and yet there are local people who feel their future is better served going to the mainland. I'm concerned about that because we need trained professionals coming back to the island. I know of many families who have who have children getting excellent education in the States.
Yeah.
Where is the incentive? Certainly they want to be with their family, but there needs to be professional incentives. We need to see what can be done to have our own children of the island coming back to Guam and contributing in private or business or public service.
That sense of pride, right?
Oh, you've hit the nail on the head. We need to work on pride in our island, and going to emphasize the fact our island, and we need to make certain that we make our decisions by us for our future.
Yeah, quite the decision for all the voters to make, of course, on August 3rd, this primary election, with possibly Mr. Lotz here on the ballot under the Democratic ticket to be Guam's next delegate. We're going to take one more break, then we'll wrap up the show to have him address you, the voters at home. Keep it here. Hafa, welcome back to the interview. Wrapping up now this episode with candidate for Guam delegate under the Democratic ticket, Dave Lotz. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And I just want to basically say I've only touched on a few of the issues. We can look at protection of our labor force. We can look at environmental protection. And I don't want to overlook the fact that we need to look at crime and we need to look at education. All of that is important to looking towards our future of our island. Keep in mind, this is our island, and I want to give people a clear choice in this campaign and not just being an echo. Thank you.
Yeah. You discussed the military buildup. You discussed healthcare. Those were some of the major the things that you said that you would unpack on the campaign trail in your platform, and should you make it to DC. Do you think that's going to be possible if you make it to DC within and serve those 2 years?
Anything is possible when you show people how it is important to Guam.
True.
And you have to address this to the members of the House particularly, and also the Senate and the administration. But if Guam is important to the defense of the United States, and we all accept it is, and Washington is, then I think Washington, in our democracy, has to accept the fact that Guam has some legitimate concerns that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and you were able to at least list some of that, so we appreciate that for you today. Now's your opportunity. I know you've already been addressing some of the viewers here, but to the voters, August 3rd is pretty much tomorrow. What would you like to say to them before they hit the polls? And you can look into that camera right there.
I'm just feeling that we need a serious discussion on these issues, and we need to look at factual basis. But I really feel that the voters need a choice and not just an echo of what we've seen in the past. And we need to have dynamic presentations and being assertive for the people of Guam. We do not want to fall into the trap of just appearing that we say the same thing over and over again, and we hope Uncle Sam will do something for us. We need to protect our island, and we need to look for assuring that there's a future of our island. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your time, and we'll be watching. And this won't be the last time that we'll hear from Mr. Lotz as well, but we wish you all the best along the campaign trail, and we'll hear from you and the rest of the candidates on the way.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll have, of course, more rounds and more interviews with the candidates as we get closer to the August 3rd primary election. Can't believe it's already tomorrow, it feels like. But for now, be safe, everyone. I'm Nick Delgado. You're watching The Interview.